Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be giving an overview and thoughts on the Lost Ark Online beta. I'm going to be dividing the video up in a few parts, each where I cover a different aspect of the game. I tried all of the classes in the character creation, but I decided to stick with the Arcana class, so that's the only class that you will see gameplay of. Let's start off by going over the combat system, as that will most likely be the first thing that catches your eye when you watch the trailer. Each character has 3 different types of skills. You have your standard skills that you gain by leveling up, a skill that charges up over time, and a special move. Now, let's begin with your basic skills. You basically have a list of skills that expands as you level up, and once you're max level, I still got 1 extra skill by questing, but there seems to only be 1 skill that you acquire this way. Out of this list, you can choose up to 8 skills to equip in the current loadout. You can create different loadouts to make swapping in between builds really easy. This can be very useful if you're someone that likes to solo dungeons sometimes but prefer a different kind of playstyle when you play in a party or for when you go into PvP. Each skill can also be leveled up using skill points to give it extra perks or passives. You can swap these perks around freely, but if you want to reset the level of your skill to gain back your skill points, you will need a token to reset them. When you create a new loadout though, you will start off with all skills at level 1 and full amount of skill points. I like to refer to the second skill type as your passive, as it is something that charges up as you use other abilities or your basic attacks. For the Arcana, for example, you draw a tarot card every time the meter fills up, and each card has its own passive benefit, like empowered basic attacks, just to give an example. Lastly, we have our special move. This move is unlocked via questing at Endgame and has a very long cooldown. It also uses a resource, so if you do not have that item in your inventory, you can't use the ability either. That covers the combat, so let's move on to the world and the leveling experience, and I really like to compare this to Final Fantasy XIV, another MMO that I play a lot, because both share a lot of similarities. In Lost Ark you have a few different islands that you can travel to using your boat, which you unlock later on in the game. Once on an island you will find a few different zones, and to go from one zone to the other you need to pass through some sort of barrier that prompts a loading screen. It doesn't bother me as much because I'm used to it from playing Final Fantasy, but it can be a negative for people that are looking for a more open world feel. As for the leveling, you'll spend most of your time on the starting island until you get close to max level. Most of your time is spent questing and doing dungeons, a similar experience to Final Fantasy as well. As for the dungeons, you have the option to either do them in a party of 4 or by yourself. When you choose to go in by yourself, the mobs will scale down a little bit to compensate for the lack of teammates. You can choose out of 2 difficulties, normal and hard mode for the dungeons. I found that hard mode is the most fun, and especially if you're doing it solo, yes, you can have it as some kind of a challenge, but if you just want to run through the dungeon on normal, then it's a good alternative. Hard mode will give you better loot though. It's not as important when you're leveling because it doesn't really affect your progress that much, but once you're at max level you can actually get some decent skill ups and item level increases from this. Once you progress far enough into the story, you will unlock your boat and are able to sail to the other islands, each with their own storyline and dungeons. Once you reach max level, there are a bunch of different things that you can do. You can travel to the other islands to progress through the story, you can run endgame dungeons to increase your item level, you can do field or world bosses, try out the PvP, or even try out the Guardian raids. I didn't have the chance to do the Guardian raids, but I did try out the other endgame activities. Each of these activities will also help you gear up, so you don't have to halt your gear progression if you want to do some more story and explore the new islands, as this will also help you gear up in its own way. I'm not sure if PvP gives you item level increases though. So, how does gearing up work then? Well, there's a few different ways depending on the activity that you choose. The endgame dungeons are accessible from any hub town on the different islands, and these dungeons will become available once you reach a certain item level. The higher your item level becomes, the more dungeons will open up for you, each time increasing the rewards they offer. The entire gear pool will drop from these dungeons, so they're a good start if you just want to increase the overall level of your gear. But once you need to only upgrade a few specific items, you will want to go into what I refer to as the world dungeons. These dungeons are unlocked as you progress through the story on the other islands. The big difference with the Hubtown dungeons is that these don't drop all of the gear that you can use, but rather certain specific pieces. This is why it's good to do these dungeons when you're targeting more specific loot instead of the Hubtown dungeons, as you can target the loot that you need. The field and the world bosses will also reward you with random gear, and then there's of course the Guardian raids. I didn't play around with PvP too much, but with the combat system that they have, it is really good fun to play. As for my personal thoughts on the game, I have to say that I'm only more hyped for the eventual release. The gameplay feels good, the questing is on the more slower side like in most MMOs, but the dungeons will pick up the pace pretty fast, so it's a good balance in between both. As mentioned before, the combat system is just great, which makes the quests that require you to kill stuff less boring. So all things considered, I'm looking forward to playing it again during the open beta and when it finally releases. With that, I think I've said about everything there is to say for now, so I'll thank you all for watching and I'll see you in the next one.